So a lot of companies are faced with the question of agile versus traditional, or waterfall, as people often term it. And it's thought, and people generally seem to think that agile is better, but waterfall is something that's been used for a long time. And the question, becomes, which should a company choose when defining and deciding on their project management methodology? But now there's a third choice, and it's hybrid agile. It's about taking aspects of agile along with other aspects that are more traditionally thought of as waterfall. And that also it's starting to be written about, and starting to be studied as well. But the first question in all this is agile actually better than traditional project management methods? Does it lead to more success? And that's an interesting question. People seem to think yes. Now, I wrote a paper with Jeffrey Pinto of Penn State back in 2015, and we actually found that agile projects are more successful. They're more successful in terms of efficiency, which is time and budget measures. They're more successful in terms of stakeholder satisfaction and in terms of overall project success. So the answer we found was that yes, agile projects are more successful. And this paper has also been widely cited, and it agrees with what people are saying, what agile evangelists are saying, and what people in general in the project management community have been saying, that agile has a lot of benefits. So, this came out a lot of years ago, this and a lot of other papers about agile. So why doesn't everybody use agile? And anyone, feel free to post a comment. Why do you guys think that people don't use agile today? Why don't some companies use agile if it's successful? Well, let's go through some potential reasons. Governance and compliance requirements. So a lot of organizations have compliance requirements, and they also want tight governance. And those requirements call into the need for documentation. There's documentation that must be done as part of these projects. And that documentation may need to start right at the beginning of the project and go all the way through. And agile is not something that fits into a tightly regulated environment that well. Safety and robustness requirements. So I had a bit of a discussion years ago at a conference with someone who was an agile writer and consultant. And he was telling me that all projects should use 100% agile. So if you're not doing fully 100% agile, you're not really getting the benefit. But then I asked him, if you're getting on an airplane to fly on vacation around the world, would you want that airplane's design to have been done ahead of time with safety consideration, performance considerations built into the requirements? Or would you have wanted the design team to evolve it as they go, as they develop it? So areas with safety and robustness require requirements and well thought out requirements before they start. And agile doesn't fit into that mold as well. It's more of a development process where you have a project, you start to build it, and you evolve the project to become better and better over time. And agile originally was developed in the product development field of software companies, and there it's been very, very successful. But now, with that success, it's being used in a lot of different areas. And those areas sometimes have different requirements than that original environment. So there's documentation requirements. Some companies have documentation requirements other than compliance or governance. They may require documentation for support, for the support team. That must be well written and detailed. Or they may require documentation be designed for the end user, the final customer. That also needs to be of a good quality. And Agile is not built for documentation. It's built for developing fast and evolving good products. Preset budgetary and time requirements. So Agile is designed, pure Agile is designed to, you keep building and evolving and changing the product. And when it's ready, you release it, right? You demonstrate it to the customer, the product manager reviews it, the product manager says, okay, this product is good enough, let's take it to market. And so at that point, you know how long it took you and how much it cost you. Up until before then, you may not know. So I always ask people in when I give this talk in other environments, I always ask people, so if you went into the CFO's office or the senior manager's office, and he asked you, how long will this project take and how much will it cost? And you tell him, I don't know, I'll let you know when it's done. And of course, at that point, he kicks you out of his office. So most large corporations require budget and time definitions for their projects. And not just because it's traditional, it's because in large organizations, other aspects, other parts of the company are dependent on that information. If you're releasing a major new product, the marketing team needs to know when to launch the ad campaign. It needs to know what features are in this product. So developing it and then telling the marketing department, oh, it's done now, here are the features a week before you launch is a non-starter. Managing large complex projects, that's also seen as an area of weakness for Agile, because Agile is self-organizing teams, which works well, between 4 and 15 people. But a lot of people question whether self-organizing teams can work in teams of 100 or 200. And that's a concern, and then likely it won't work that well without some other type of structure in place. Okay, so from a paper by West, 2010. So the question is then, what do you do? So if you have to compromise on Agile, and you can't do pure Agile because you have some of these requirements in your organization, and I think a lot of organizations have these types of requirements in their projects. So what's going to happen, right? So Lord Cecil, who was a British aristocrat in the 1800s, said, compromise is agreement between two men to do what both agree is wrong. So he's saying compromise results in a much worse product and a much worse result than doing the right thing. On the other hand, Rita Mae Brown, who was a feminist last century, said compromise is the work of mature people. So in that case, compromise is good. Compromise is the right way that adults decide on things and get to the best possible conclusion. So which one is right? Is compromising on Agile, is it good or is it bad? And what are the impacts? So based on that, we decided to do a survey and ask people how they ran their projects, whether they ran the project using Agile or were hybrid methods, what methodologies they use, and characteristics of the project. So we asked all our participants to give us 2 examples of projects, one more successful, one less successful. And we had about 500 respondents to our survey. And in the end, we had a validated set of about 477 projects. Some people didn't finish the survey. Some people gave the numbers that they made some mistakes, and some of the numbers didn't make sense. So at the end of it, we had 477 projects. And the respondents were mostly project managers who would have detailed information about a project, how it was run, whether it was successful. So again, what we had was about 400, almost 500 projects. The PM experience was approximately 12 years, so experienced project managers. The project budget rate was $3.5 million was the mean, and median was $450,000. So there were some very large projects in the sample that increased the mean, and some smaller projects as well. Project duration was about 12 months on average, which is what I would expect. I think the average project is about 12 months from my own personal experience. Project team size, meeting was about 10 people, which again, I think is average for most projects. And it was 65% software and 35% other. So there was a big software component, but there were other projects as well in the survey, and 60% in North America, but we did have a worldwide response. So then we asked them, what did you use? Did you use Agile, Traditional, or Hybrid? Right? What was your overall methodological approach to your project? So in the chat, what do you folks think? What was the most common approach? Hybrid. Okay, so Mike says hybrid. Everyone agree? All right, so let's see if Mike was correct. Mike was correct. Hybrid was the most common approach to managing projects, with more than 50% of projects using hybrid methods or hybrid agile. So it's an interesting result, and it's actually been true for a few years. Other studies that I've done have said more or less the same, and it seems to get bigger every year. But you can see pure agile is only about 15%. So the interesting thing you might ask is why aren't there a lot of books about hybrid approaches? Why aren't there as many books about hybrid approaches as there are about agile approaches? So methodologies, what do people think was the most common methodology that was used in the survey? Was it Kanban or Scrum or Lean or Waterfall? What do folks think? Anyone willing to guess? Kanban? Okay, we have 1 vote for Waterfall, 1 vote for Kanban. Anyone else? Another Waterfall. No Scrums? Okay, so have you guys read my paper or seen this presentation before? It is in fact Waterfall, so you guys are correct. And number 2 is Scrum. Kanban was number 5. So, and it kind of makes sense when you think about it, because if most projects are hybrid, then those hybrid projects will make use of some waterfall techniques, right? And so people were able to say all the techniques they used. But Scrum was actually used quite regularly. It was used by about 47% of people in projects. So it's so Scrum is by far the number one agile methodology, but waterfall is still used throughout the industry. And we asked them, well, how did you, what techniques did you use? What agile practices did people use? So these were the top 6 agile practices. So cross-functional teams, obviously, daily stand-up meetings were quite often used. And, I always ask, when I teach, I ask my classes, why do stand-up meetings? And stand-up meetings, because people are uncomfortable, they want to sit down and have a coffee, so they're much shorter that way and more effective. And self-organizing, self-motivated teams, and sprint planning was number 4, and constant delivery of partial results was number 5, with about 37% of projects reporting that. And to me, I'm a little surprised by that, because to me that is one of the main benefits and one of the main drivers to agile success is the iterative delivery of improvements and partial results as you go, and that customer communication as you discuss these new the new features that you put in, and getting that feedback and being able to modify and improve the product based on that feedback. And then finally, sprint review. Other use cases, other artifacts that people used, and people made a lot of use of use cases and user stories. So use cases are very common. User stories are actually surprisingly common, almost 50%. So that's that. User stories seem to be one of the things that people take out of Agile on a regular basis, as well as backlogs. And I think Kanban, for example, and Scrum both make major uses of those types of artifacts. Visual artifacts and daily builds are rounding out the top 5. Daily builds were used by a quarter. It only applies to software, but again, it's very good practice. I'm surprised it's not higher up, but that's how people are using methodologies today. Okay, and the practices. So the most common was time boxing. Iterative incremental development was the second most. Continuous integration, which I think very similar to daily builds, was reported in 106 projects out of 500, and then things sort of went down a little bit from there. And you had things like feature-driven development, test-driven development, pair programming, only 44%. And I ran a pair programming project many years ago. I helped pilot it for a major corporation, and it did work well. But the feeling that I got as an IT manager at that point was that the quality was good, but you probably could have delivered more if people were working individually than as in pairs on one set of code. And so it's not it's used, but not hasn't taken off like something like Scrum has, which Scrum is obviously a major methodology today. So that's what people are using. That's what people told us they're using today in their projects. So now I'm going to get into the statistics, and I think people are going to start to roll their eyes and potentially fall asleep. I hope not. So I'm going to but I'm going to dive right into this the statistics and all the numbers from the research paper. But I'll try to make it as understandable as possible. Okay, so these are the results, and this, as my co-author spent a lot of time analyzing these numbers. And so what do all these numbers mean? So what is what is this incomprehensible chart? What's it all about? So what we did was we took a look at performance measures. So we had budget and time, scope and quality, and stakeholder success. So we measured all the projects based on those three measures, those three success measures. Then we took a look at different aspects of the projects to see what aspects had the biggest impact on that success. For example, goal clarity is how clear the goal of the project is. And we all know that projects with unclear goals are likely to run into trouble. So now the grayed out parts of this chart indicate statistical significance. And that's this number in brackets. Statistical significance has to be less than 0.05 to be considered statistically valid. And if it's above that, your numbers aren't telling you much. Your numbers aren't telling you that something is important or isn't, right? So if you were to measure the speed of cars on the local long street, you wouldn't expect car color to be significantly impacting the speed, right? The brand of car might be. Your Mustang might be going faster than your minivan, but the color wouldn't correlate with speed, so it would have a significance. It would not be significant. You'd have a significance of 0.0 or 0.1, which is not 0.05. So anyway, so all of the grade areas are significant. So if you look at goal clarity, it is significant for all success, budget, scope, and stakeholder. So having clear goals on a project is very important for all aspects of success. Same with stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement is significant for all aspects of budget, scope, and stakeholder. So have stakeholder success, right? So have stakeholders involved in your projects as closely as possible if you want successful projects. And all that's pretty standard project management knowledge, probably not surprising to most people. Now, team experience only helps with scope and stakeholder success. And you can imagine that an experienced team, they see that it's more important to have a quality product and have stakeholders happy. And maybe if you're a little bit over budget or a little bit late, it's worth a price worth paying for having a better product. And same with attitude, change to attitude. So if you change attitude, so the attitude people have towards changes during the project, if people are open to changes, open to modifying the product based on feedback, then you have better scope quality success and better stakeholder success. But your budget time success is not improved for obvious reasons. If you're willing to accept changes and you're open to changes, it's going to likely impact your budget and your time of your project. Okay. And the other one that's interesting here is complexity, also all gray, but you notice here it's negative in all cases. So what that means is that it has a negative impact. The complex projects make you less successful in your budget time goals, in your scope goals, and in your stakeholder goals. Again, not surprising for experienced project managers. Okay, so the goal of this is Agile or hybrid better? So the final columns we have here are Agile and hybrid. Okay, and what we see here is that in both cases, they're not statistically significant for budget and time or for scope and quality. So we can't say that they improve budget time or improve scope quality. And now these two are compared to waterfall. So Agile and hybrid aren't going to give you better budget and time delivery than waterfall. Waterfall actually does a good job of that already, so they're not going to improve on that. And they're not going to give you a better scope of quality delivery in general, because they are, again, waterfall is pretty good at doing that. What it does give you is better stakeholder success than waterfall. And it's both, it's significant both for Agile and for hybrid. Okay, and the other thing I'm going to point out about this is that these numbers here, what do these numbers mean? Well, these numbers are how strong the effect is, right? And it's, so in this case, the effect, the hybrid effect is 44, right? How is that strong or that good? Well, if you look at stakeholder engagement is 45, goal clarity is 46, right? And Agile is better than all of those. So if you're having an Agile project, it has a better impact on your success than if you have really good stakeholder engagement or really good goal clarity. So Agile will help you get a better stakeholder view, or a happier stakeholder after you deliver your project. And the thinking in academic studies over the past probably 15, 20 years is, what's the most important aspect of project delivery? What's the most important aspect of success? And usually it's thought of as stakeholder success, right? And that's the, you know, that is seen as the number one, seen as the number one driver. Whereas in the past, you would say it was time and budget, but people think, you know, that's changed for a lot of different reasons, right? So one example is for example, the Sydney Opera House. So those of you who have probably seen this in some other talks know that the Sydney Opera House was 700% over budget and 7 years behind schedule, something like that, or 1,000% over budget. But yet it became a symbol of Sydney and a symbol of Australia, and one of the reasons that people go and visit it. So the fact that the scope, the time budget success measures were blown out of the water did not impact the overall success of the project. And yet it's seen as a very successful project overall. So again, but the one thing to note here as well is that these numbers are close, and statistically they're very close. So the difference between Agile and hybrid is actually very low. Statistically, it's about the same, right? I mean, given the error results, it's about the same. So compared to traditional, Agile approaches raise stakeholder success by 0.49, and hybrid raise stakeholder success by 0.4047. So these numbers are, you know, they don't, it's hard to explain from the real world. It's a rating system based on statistics. So they're within statistical error limits. So the results are actually, they are very close. They are, you know, we can't tell the difference statistically between those two results. So what were the final conclusions from this analysis? If conventional measures of project success, like budget, schedule, and scope, then any of the three approaches can deliver positive outcomes. So if your main goal is budget and time and scope, then you can choose any method, because these days project managers are professionals and they can deliver, in most cases, a pretty successful waterfall project. And projects that are well understood and clearly defined fall into this category. So if it's a well understood project, waterfall is fine, and you don't get as much benefit from agile or hybrid as you would from other types of projects, more complex projects and more challenging projects. Now, if there is a need for stakeholder and client engagement, then using the iterative delivery processes is better. And hybrid or agile approaches will prove more successful than traditional approaches. So if you need to work with the stakeholders to develop a better product, if keeping the stakeholders happy is a key goal, and really is a key goal in most projects, right? One of the other courses I teach, I mentioned that when I took my MBA years and years ago, one thing they said in the marketing part of it was that all organizations are marketing driven, true or false. So in the end, all organizations have a customer, and you have to meet those customer expectations and keep the customer happy. And even if you, and I ask, so what organization is not marketing driven? And sometimes, and people think for a while, and they have difficulty finding one, because even you can say even a government department that doesn't have to make sales still wants to keep the customers happy, so the party in power isn't voted out because of bad press, and so they don't get a lot of complaints. So everybody needs to meet the stakeholders and customers' expectations and deliver them a good product to maximize their success. And taking time at the beginning of the project to discuss and decide the overall approach is worthwhile. And to select practices from several methodologies makes sense. And it's a very worthwhile use of project leaders' time. And you can see from this survey that different techniques were used and used in different projects. So you may decide that you want to use waterfall plus stand-up meetings, plus time boxing, plus regular delivery of project deliverables or projects demos, etc. And that may be what fits in your organization. But you also may decide you need to use use cases and detailed requirements documents. Right. So having that discussion and thinking about what makes sense for the project is a useful time and a useful use of senior people's time. And sponsors and senior managers, again, should be thinking about freeing projects from the strict application of methodologies, and maybe challenge project teams to come up with the process that adds the most value and that matches their environment. Because as we saw, there are cases where pure agile doesn't work. And there's cases where you can benefit. Clearly, you can benefit from agile techniques. This study and the previous study both clearly show that agile projects are more successful. But you can consider that, not only does it make sense to add waterfall techniques to agile projects, but it also makes sense to add agile techniques to waterfall projects. In certain environments, it may not be possible for a variety of reasons to fully use agile methods, but reading agile methodologies and understanding them can give you some ideas and techniques that can make waterfall projects more successful. So why? So that, these are the results, but one of the questions is why these results? Why is hybrid as successful as agile, or very close, right? Very within statistical significance. So you have one paper that says agile projects are more successful, and in fact, what it says, this is my paper from 2015, is the more agile you are, the more successful you tend to be. So, agile projects are more successful, but hybrid doesn't use all of agile. There's big pieces that it doesn't agree, it skips over, and doesn't agree with, and aspects of the Agile Manifesto which have to be ignored by many agile projects. So, but it's just as successful, right? So why is that? Why that doesn't make any sense? Why if agile projects are more successful, if you cut out chunks of agile, why is it still just as successful? Anybody have any thoughts on this? Probably a little hard to type in the comments, but I'm curious to see if anyone thinks why. Why is that? Iterations? Yeah. So maybe adding the iterations to hybrid makes waterfall much more successful. That could well be. I don't disagree with that suggestion. Any other thoughts? Clear communication through stand-ups. Yeah, I also agree that that's useful. And my PhD supervisor, she actually worked in the U.S. Navy on a submarine on submarine development back in the late 60s. She's passed away now, but she's my the supervisor for my PhD, and she said they had stand-up meetings back then in the 60s. So her point was all this new supposedly new aspects that Agile brings to the table aren't all new, but they saw the value of stand-up meetings back then, long before anyone even had thought of, well, software development teams, much less Scrum. So I agree that clear communication through stand-ups may make all projects more successful. So that can make waterfall projects more successful. One other item we found from the research is most respondents perceived agile methods as good or excellent, right? Like what percentage do you think thought agile methods are good, at least good? Anyone want to take a guess? What do you guys think? 51%, 60, 70%, 80%? 94%. So most people in the project management community see agile methods as having benefits and having value. Okay, and there's a couple of things there. One is that these are professionals that have a dozen years of experience, so they see what the benefits are. And so they understand that the benefits based on their experience. And it's also, you can say, if people think positively about something, then if they think something will be successful, then it will be successful, right? So if they have that positive view of Agile, then it's likely to, it's both, it can be because people have the experience, have the knowledge, and see the benefit, or that positive view also reinforces the success of Agile. So when you have some Agile aspects in hybrid project, then people have, they add the ones they see the most benefit to their projects. So your waterfall projects become better because people, experienced managers, take the best part of Agile, add it to the waterfall projects, right? As well, you can also, one other aspect that we found in this research is the quality of requirements documents is linked to success in all types of projects. So having good requirements documents leads to successful projects of all types, either agile, hybrid, or waterfall. And that's not something that you would read in an agile manifesto or in the Scrum methodology. But good requirements documents help projects be successful. And good requirements documents are part of waterfall. So if you bring that aspect of waterfall into agile, then you can also improve the success. So maybe you lose some things by not going full agile, but then maybe you can also gain some things. Quality of documentation in general is linked to higher success, particularly for agile projects. So documentation in general has a big impact on the success, and that impact is actually bigger on agile projects than on waterfall projects. And that's likely because the average waterfall project already has good documentation, whereas some agile projects have very little documentation, and probably they suffer a little bit for that. And the agile projects that have good documentation tend to be the most successful ones. And similarly, the quality of the WBS, of the work breakdown structure of the project plan, is also linked with success for all projects, even agile projects. So having a detailed project plan is definitely not in agile methodologies as a requirement or something you should do at all. But having a good quality work breakdown structure is linked to success in all projects. So again, that's something that agile projects can benefit by getting from waterfall in many cases. And so that may be one of the reasons that hybrid projects are as successful as agile projects. So the overarching conclusion is that hybrid approaches are a viable option for organizations today. Right? And so no one should be embarrassed that they're using a hybrid agile or thinking that, I'm using hybrid agile, but I really need to try to get to full agile next year. Because hybrid approaches are viable options for organizations today, especially when pure agile is not going to work well. And that's, in some ways, that's not surprising because there are a lot of professional project managers, there are a lot of professional managers out there. They're not going to choose a methodology that's going to result in less successful projects. People won't do that for their organizations, and managers like to be the ones managing successful projects as opposed to managing less successful projects. So it speaks to the fact that people are making rational decisions and people are choosing reasonable approaches. Okay. Now, there is also another thinking that I come to out of this study is that perhaps there are aspects of the Agile Manifesto and aspects of Agile methodologies which aren't necessarily 100% true. Because if you can take out big sections of what's considered agile and still have projects that are just as successful, then maybe those aspects aren't really important. And so that's something that I'm interested in, and perhaps it's something for future research. But again, as the overall advice to project managers is take a hard look at what your project needs and doesn't need. Don't worry about not following Agile perfectly, but take you and your team, think about what aspects of Agile is best and what aspects can help your project and your environment, and use those. And as well, and consider, if you are adding practices, also consider doing it in iterative process, like in Agile. You may want to do one project where you just add stand-up meetings and iterations. The next project on, you may want to do user stories and backlogs, as you slowly transition from a fully waterfall environment to a hybrid environment. And step by step, see what works in your environment and what doesn't. And I think that you know, making those rational decisions and communicating them to your management is the way to get the best out of methodologies and deliver the most successful projects. And then then you just do what's those rational project manager things that we've all been doing for years. Try to get stakeholder input as often as possible. Try to make sure you have as clear goals as you can. Try to get an experienced team, all those things that project managers have always wanted. And that will help maximize your project success and long-term career goals. Okay, so these are the references, the papers I discussed in this presentation. You can look them up. They are available on the internet.
Pedro, much thanks. Thank you for taking your time and for presenting with us.
Thank you.